Okay everyone, welcome back to another video on the channel today. We're back on GT Sport. We're back with a daily race at Sardinia, race track version A. Now this was in the Redbull X2019, sorry, the newer version of the car. Now we already uploaded a few videos from this race, but there was quite a lot of races with quite a lot of fast drivers. You can see in this race we've got Fuvaros, Williams Fuvaros starting in P2. Now another driver that I rate extremely highly on this game. I think he's definitely up there within the top 10 best drivers on GT Sport. So this is going to be a real battle. Can we compete with him at this combination? We're starting from pole still. He still hasn't improved his time enough to get pole position, so managed to stay on pole. He's on the right hand side now going into turn 1. Let's have a little look as we go through to turn 1. We're going to have a little bit of jostling around behind us. He gets a little bit of contact on his rear, but luckily he saves it. But he loses a position there straight away, so that is really vital for myself there in this race, in these Redbull X2019 cars. But you can see he's not too far behind, just within 2 seconds there behind P2, right on the rear gearbox of P2 actually, as we now jump back on board with myself. And you can see straight away with Fuvaros down into P3, my main aim now for this race is to push quite hard on this opening lap on the first 2 laps, because I want to get out the slipstream of P2 to give him no ability to bring Fuvaros nearer to me, and hopefully P2 can manage to hold Fuvaros off maybe for 1, 2, 3 laps. It'll be interesting to see how long he can hold Fuvaros. Now Fuvaros, like I say, is one of the fastest drivers I think on G Sport, especially in combinations like this, very high downforce cars, really fast flowing corners. It's the type of combination that he would do very well in, and we've seen him do very well in previous races. So this is going to be a real battle. Can I even compete with him? I wasn't too sure. My guess is at this early stage for this opening lap, he's going to be doing a lot of fuel saving behind P2 until he gets an opportunity to go for the pass. So while I'm burning this fuel up on this opening lap to pull away, I wanted to get rid of that slipstream. He's probably done the fuel saving, which will give him a little bit of an advantage when it comes to the pit stop. But now that we've got that gap, you can see it's over 1 second. That's a gap that you need to have on GT Sport pretty much, so that you're safe to start bringing in some fuel saving into your race. So what you're going to see now is a little bit of short shifting, not too drastic though. I want to keep the pace quite aggressive, so shifting around about 80 to 85%. You see they're not really taking it all the way to the end of the bar, just doing some nice casual shifting, but keeping the race pace fairly strong. You see we're still increasing that gap to P2. So far everything is looking quite good in this race. We're building the gap up to P2. Fuvaros still hasn't managed to get past P2 either. Assault Nature I think it is there. So it's going to be interesting. Is he going to look for a move? You can see in the background there, he was looking to make a move there through the corner. Is he then going to be able to get the draft through these corners and go for a move into the very tight corner? Let's have a little look on that left hand side when he's going to manage to get past him. I'm not sure what corner it would have been as we go on our way, still trying to maintain this position in the lead and keep it fairly consistent. But you're going to see him behind us, the gap's increased there. So yeah, Williams Fuvaros has made the move into that tight left hand corner and made the pass stick. So he's now up into P2. We've got a 2.4 second lead over Fuvaros in this race, and that is not a lot when you've got someone as fast as Fuvaros behind you. Now in terms of outright speed, Fuvaros was not far off of Igor, I think, in terms of his ability to lap, you know, when pushing really aggressive. So this was a very strong combination. I think when we were live during the chat, a few people did say that Fuvaros was pretty much right up there for this combination, if not the fastest they've seen. So it was going to be a real battle to keep Fuvaros behind, and it'd be interesting to see what sort of fuel saving is he going to be able to do up into the pit stop, and what strategy are we going to go on in this race, because there was alternative strategies you could go on, maybe pitting lap 6 or 7. They were the 2 variations really you could do in those stopper, although I don't think it was the best way to go. And for me personally, what I was thinking at this point in the race was I'm going to try the lap 7 pit stop, because that way was working out a little bit better for me in other races. Sometimes if you pit lap 6, you run the risk of dropping yourself into traffic. Sometimes you can get lucky and have a nice gap there, but sometimes you can drop yourself in some traffic that can cause you issues. So I kind of wanted to go the safest way, although it is a possibility you're going to lose time because the car behind is going to get a little bit of an undercut. Although I don't think it's as drastic as it used to be, the undercut, because I think since they've added this the tyre heating up a little bit more, you need to get a bit more heat in your tyres before they can really drive to the maximum. They are still much faster than modern tyres obviously, but it seems to take 1 lap to really build that temperature up before you can start laying down them lap times. And that's something that's obviously been something to work on in FIA as well in terms of qualifying, because you do tend to need to get your tyres into a certain type of like temperature range recently. I would love if they could incorporate some sort of like temperature chart for our tyres, just so we could see what sort of temperatures are producing the best results in terms of lap times. Whether they'll do that, I'm not too sure. You know, it's probably a little bit too in-depth polyphony to worry about, but it would be nice, something like that, so we could actually see, because there is definitely something with the tyres in terms of temperatures, because I do find that when I do a little bit more of an aggressive outlap in FIA now, I tend to do a better lap in qualifying, so it could be something just to keep trying to do and experiment with. As we see now, Fuvaros now starting to close in a bit at this stage. He's obviously done a fair bit of fuel saving on these opening 4 laps in first. Well, we're coming to the end of lap 4, and now he's starting to push a little bit more. The gaps are still at 2.3 seconds though, so we're doing a fairly good job at the moment. He's not really gained any time on me. However, that is because I think he's been doing a little bit more fuel saving than what I've been doing. Although I have been trying to do as much fuel saving as possible, but obviously during them opening first 2 laps, I pushed quite aggressive because I wanted to get out the slipstream and just give myself a bit of breathing space. But you can see now down to 2.1 seconds. He's obviously on a charge. He's going to be pushing, and he's obviously done quite a bit of fuel saving now. So he's still probably doing fuel saving during these next few laps, but not as aggressive as what he was doing early on. As you can see, the gap is starting to come down now. Now the tyre wear is kicking in. He seems to be coping with that little bit of extra tyre wear, a little bit better than what I'm doing also. But still, this is probably the best I've driven in quite a long time on Gran Turismo. You know, having to push with someone like Fuvaros behind you and keep on it, especially when you're streaming as well, with that added bit of pressure, it can really, you know, it can cause mistakes quite easily, as we now go through that really tricky left-hand corner. But I tended to do that quite well with that early upshift into 4th gear, seemed to settle the rear down and kind of look after the rear tyres also. It wasn't so aggressive when you put the power down. It was just numbing the power just a little bit so they didn't spin up as much. But now go through this really tricky section. This section was so enjoyable, but also very tricky, especially when the tyres are wearing down, because it's 100% flat out all the way through here. You'll see no lifting at all, keeping it maximum to the throttle down there. And the only thing you need to worry about there is one of the worst situations is if you've got a car right in front of you. When you pick up a bit of dirty air, the front end just loses all grip and you can run wide really easily. But now Fuvaros there down to 1.7 seconds. He's definitely gained it. He's gained 6 attempts on us on the last few laps. We're going to go over the line and start lap 6. Now this is going to be the interesting part now. Will Fuvaros decide to pit? We'll have a little look on the replay camera now for this lap on our lap 6, just to see how close he is. You can see him in the background there, closing in and hunting me down, and it does put you under a lot of pressure in these types of races when you've got someone as fast as that pushing you to the maximum and really making you drive as well as you can, really. As you can see, Fuvaros also pushing aggressive. You can see my rear going. Fuvaros also losing the rear in the exact same place as our tyres are starting to feel that wear kicking in, and we're both pushing very aggressively in this race because we know this is going to be really close in terms of with the pit stop, who goes first or who's gonna, where we're gonna come out after the pit stop race. I really didn't know at the time when driving this, because I wasn't 100% sure what sort of fuel he had on. I was quite convinced that he had done a little bit more fuel saving than myself, although I didn't really know how much. And again, you can see Fuvaros there hustling that car through the corner, really getting aggressive. He's really pushing. So this looks like it's going to be his in-lap in terms of pitting, because he's driving that car, taking every little bit of life out of them tyres now, because he knows he's not going to be using them for another lap. So he can really get on the throttle, be aggressive out the corners, and you can see that gap is really close, down to about 1.3, 1.4 seconds, as we're going to jump back on board now, down to 1.3 seconds. Let's have a little look at his fuel. It's going in the pits there in the background. He's on 43%, while I had 40%, so he managed to save 3% more fuel. Now, I wasn't sure if this was the right strategy. I still don't know, really. It's even though I know the result of this race, it's quite hard to know what would have been the better strategy to go on, as we now continue on lap 7, and we're obviously doing the same strategy as Calster and a Sultanator. Now this is why a lot of people were doing this strategy, because it actually worked quite well at this combination pitting on lap 7, and it was less risky. So I kind of took the safer way in terms of what lap I was going to pit. Now if Fuvaros has had a clean run out of the pits, it's going to be very close. He had 3% more fuel, but he had a 1.4 second gap to me. Now with that gap about 1.3, 1.4, and the fact that I knew he had pitted on this lap, I kind of felt that he was going to jump me 100% during the pit stop phase. So I was thinking at this point, I think I'm going to go aggressive on the fuel and just fuel the car up a little bit more than what I normally would, just so I could try and push, because we're going to have 1 lap fresher tyres, and we're going to have, if we can put a bit more fuel in so we can drive aggressive, we might be able to get fairly close and, you know, push him towards the end if he's going to get past me anyway during the pit stop phase. But just let's see, will he get past me in the pit stop phase? This is going to be really interesting, because it's going to show the undercut. Before, when the tyres obviously heated up a lot quicker, I think the undercut worked a lot better. But considering, looking at our tyres there, they were pretty much dead, and Fuvaros will have had completely fresh tyres on that outlap. So what we're going to do now is we go in the pits with a lot more fuel than a Sultanator, but a little bit less than Calster. So Calster's done a fair amount of fuel saving there. That's going to gain him a little bit of time during the pit stop phase. But you can see I'm going to put the fuel in now and go quite aggressive. Now, whether this was a good idea, I really don't know. You can see I decided to go a little bit over the bar. Maybe I should have stopped a little bit short, but you can see as we come out, we're in P1, but there is Fuvaros, clean pass. Now, if I would have stopped it a bit short, I think he still would have been able to go for a move into turn 1. It would have been so close if we would have stopped that fueling up at the end. Maybe I could have held on to P1 and then had the fresher tyres and battled him, but had to been worrying about fuel saving, while I think he would have had a little bit more aggressive fuel on. But now we're going to have to push and be the attacker in this race, really, and just try and keep Fuvaros on the limit right the way to the checker flag. And if I can keep him honest to the end, I'll be extremely happy, to be honest, because like I said, Fuvaros is, you know, he's up there. He's one of the fastest on the game, especially in combinations like this. He's really flying, and I've just got to try and keep it consistent. We've got Calster behind us as well now. Gained a bit of time from that pit stop by obviously able to put a little bit less fuel in, because he had saved 4% more fuel than me, and he's about 3.2 seconds behind. And it'd be interesting if we can just keep that gap to Calster. What I did find in the second stint from races that we had done with Calster, on the second stint, our pace was pretty much identical to the 10th every lap. It was really close between myself and Calster, but during the first stint, I seemed to be able to pull a bit more on the early stint when he was doing the fuel saving, and then it would equal out on the second stint. So it was really interesting, our ways of doing this race. But you can see there, Fuvaros over 2-second lead now. He's really pushing on this first main lap on them tyres now that they're up to temperature, and a 23.6. That shows you the type of pace that Fuvaros has got at this combination. That's in race pace, insane lap pace by Fuvaros, and I think that's actually matched or equaled what Igor Fraga did in a race as well. So very interesting there that Fuvaros is able to match that type of pace, and it shows you that I'm actually doing quite well, I think, in this race, to be able to stay that close to Fuvaros. And this is our main lap. Not the best first sector there, but we're going to keep pushing. You can see we're actually behind our first sector from our heavy fuel load on the first stint. Obviously the car's a bit lighter on this second stint than it was on the first stint, so it should be a little bit faster, but we're behind there with that first sector not quite being optimal. But we're going to keep pushing on this lap and just try and keep him honest. Like I say, he's got lap older tyres, which is the equivalent of times, you know, it's like 13 laps I think it was. I think the tyre wear was on times 12 or 13, so yeah, one lap is like 13 lap newer tyre, so it's going to definitely pay its way back towards the end of the race. Obviously during the first 2 laps on the tyres, first 2-3 laps, there's not a massive difference in between performance when it's only 1 lap difference like that. But then towards the end, when you've done 3 or 4 laps and they start building that wear up and you start getting more understeer on the front tyres and the rear start losing traction, that's when the tyre wear will take effect with having the newer tyres on by 1 lap. As I go over the line there with a 24.3, not a great lap. Obviously we made that error during the first sector, and we also didn't quite hook up the tight left-hander onto the back straight onto the final power zone over the finishing line. The really tight left-hander kind of got, you might have seen it on my expression, didn't quite hook it up, so we didn't really excel on that lap. We had done a 23.9 on this second stint, so that lap was pretty much 4 tenths off my optimal lap, so we lost a bit there for Fuvaros. We could have gained a bit on him there, and we kept it fairly static to 2.3 seconds, but we could have actually reduced that down. As you see, I actually go on a blue sector there, so that shows you, you know, with the tyres being a little bit older, you can see the wear on them on the chart, and they've took a bit of wear out of them, but we've still gone blue. So that first lap should have been a bit stronger, but we're still within, you know, touching distance. We're 2.3 seconds behind. Maybe we could have been, you know, under that 2-second margin and put a bit more pressure on Fuvaros. But you can see he's really pushing the limits on this track. And you can see he's really hustling that car. He's chucking it around and getting some great lap times out of it, considering he's got that lap older tyre. But we're still pushing 2.3, 2.4 seconds behind him. Kousa 3.3, 3.4 seconds. It's a constant gap. It literally doesn't move. You just keep looking at it. It'll always be between 3.2 and 3.4 seconds, that gap. It shows you how consistent Kousa was driving as well. And Kousa is on the pad. Remember that. We've already talked about Kousa in the other videos. He's a pad racer, and he's able to keep the consistency. So the pad is 100% competitive at the majority of combinations. I would say actually, in combinations like these, the pad can be a little bit better sometimes. I don't know whether this track it was particularly, but a lot of high downforce cars, the pad does tend to do very well with a lot of competitors in the FIA races as well. As we now come through this real tricky corner, you've got to be so careful getting on the power, because you can run out on that curve and then lose the rear and lose a lot of time. But you can see we're keeping that gap very static to Fuvaros. He has increased it up to about, you know, going up to 2.5, 6, 7, then 2.4. It is moving around a lot, but we're keeping within distance, and it's the final lap where he's going to start suffering a bit more with them tyres. But did he put enough? Maybe he put a lot of fuel in also on the pit stop, so he could really drive aggressive, because it was quite strange how we came out that close to him when he had 3% more fuel and he'd done an undercut. So my guess is he put a lot of fuel in that car to really, you know, rev it out and get the most out of it every single lap. As we are gaining sometimes, we have got that lap pressure tyres on, but we're not really. It's fairly static, the gap, but again, like I say, when you're racing someone like Fuvaros, it's very hard to gain time even with a lap over the tyres, when he's got a lap over the tyres as we go over the line. And now this is going to be where there might be a slight drop off on his tyres. Lap 12 and 13, you know, he's done already quite a few laps on them tyres. My tyres are still reasonable. The front grip is fairly good. They are worn a bit on the rear, you can see that. We had our brake bias, I think it was a -4 for this race, to try and save the rears as much as possible. That's something we always tend to do. You know, if your rears wear out a lot in a car like this, then you go front bias, because the front bias is going to put a bit more wear onto the front tyres rather than the rears. If you go to the rear bias, it tends to wear out the rears. So again, vice versa, if it's your, you know, if you're wearing your front tyres really aggressively, you tend to go rear bias, and that's why with the Mustang, stuff like that in Group 4, I tend to go rear bias, because then it helps the front tyres keep their grip throughout the race. But now just having a little look at Kousa there in P3 still, and just look what I'm talking about, the consistency and how closely matched we were. 3.3 seconds, it literally has not budged, that delta. It's been on 3.2 to 3.4 throughout the whole race, since the pit stop, and the gap is starting to come down to Fuvaros now. You can see I think you can see it on traction zones, he seems to be losing a bit on the exits of corners. He doesn't seem to have the traction I've got out of the Red Bull with the fresher tyres on, so he's losing a bit on power zones, but he's still doing very well when it comes to, you know, chucking it through the corners and keeping lap time, you know, within that range. But you see we go over the line with another 24, 1 minute 24.5 or 6 that is. So our lap times have been very consistent. You can see on the right hand side 24.3, 24.2, 24.5, 24.6 I think it is there. So probably the most consistent I've driven this second stint. There's no massive errors, and that's what I had to do to be able to stay with someone like Fuvaros. You have to be driving at your very best, and I think Kousa was actually driving extremely well on the second stint also, keeping his lap time really solid all the way through these laps. As we now going to start catching up, you can see it's down to 2.3 seconds. Fuvaros is definitely starting to struggle a bit. We've gained 3 seconds on this one lap already, and we are getting a little bit closer, but it doesn't look like it's going to be enough to challenge him on the finish, because, you know, you're not going to gain 2 seconds over Fuvaros unless he makes a mistake somewhere on the track. As we go through the tight left hand corner, getting on the power as early as possible. You can see I was really pushing. I was putting everything into this, really 100% concentration. We were in FIA mode, you know, racing someone like Williams Fuvaros had to be in FIA mode to be able to compete with him and getting into the braking zone. And again, you can see during the brakes he doesn't look as confident now, and on the power you're going to see this is the type of zone where we're going to have more traction. Down to 1.9 seconds. So we've pushed Fuvaros in this race. He's obviously had to keep on it. He couldn't afford to make any big mistakes, and for me that is a good result to be able to be that close to Williams Fuvaros after 13 laps in a high downforce car race. And we actually go over the finishing line with a very fast time of 18:53. My fastest finishing time that I have done so far, which we've done on this combination. And Williams Fuvaros actually went over line in a 15:51, even with that lap 1 little bit of chaos where he lost a bit of time stuck behind Assaultinator. So maybe he could have just crept his time under the 1 minute 50 barrier. I'm not too sure if he managed it in other races. It's possible he did, but for me, 1853, pretty much a perfect run for me. There was a few tiny errors. Maybe we could have pitted that 1 lap earlier. It would have been interesting. If I pitted earlier, we may have came out ahead of him. But then would I have had the pace to keep him behind? I'm not too sure with the same tyres on. And also we could have maybe have underfueled a bit and tried to held him off a bit during the through the corners with them fresher tyres on. It would have been, there's so many ways we could have run that, but we decided that way, and I did enjoy running it that way. And being able to push and drive aggressively, that seems to be how I do enjoy driving on GT Sport. But a good result, still finishing P2, a fun race, probably one of the more enjoyable races I've had on the game. They're the type of races that I play GT Sport for, when you're driving against the best drivers on the game and you've got to be in 100% concentration and no one's making mistakes. It does get quite intense. So I hope you enjoyed that video. Make sure you leave a like if you enjoyed it. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already subscribed, and click that notification button so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks again for watching, everyone.